So I'm Charlotte. I'm an accountant 20 odd years into the old career. I think for me, wealth ultimately comes down to being settled. For a long time I wasn't. 45 now. Spent my 20s, 30s pretty unsettled. And while I was working away at a career and doing the things you should do, saving up for the deposit, getting the house and chipping away at the mortgage, it was a pretty, I suppose, fast-paced life, but not happy. So for me, wealth sitting here now in a much better space in life is just being more settled. I've lost 30 odd kilos in the last few years. A lot fitter. I got married nearly a couple of years ago, which makes a big difference. And she's got 3 kids, of which 2 are still at home, so that makes a difference. Having spent 20 years kind of on my own and living life as an adult and getting out there working basically. So for me, I suppose wealth, I would say, it's definitely nice to actually be in a place that you're kind of setting yourselves up. So I'm Charlotte. I'm an accountant 20 odd years into the old career, and I suppose where am I at now in terms of my wealth, or I should say our wealth. So I got married nearly a couple of years ago. So Rose and I have 2 homes. We happened to meet later in life. One had a home, I had a home. So that's sort of the core from, if you like, a dollar perspective of wealth. And doing the old classic paying down the mortgage and fast as possible, and starting to think about what else we should do with the money as we get towards, well, not quite the end of mortgages. But I think for me, wealth is, I suppose ultimately it comes down to being settled. And for a long time I wasn't. So 45 now, probably spent the first, well, my 20s, 30s pretty unsettled. And while I was, working away at a career, doing the things you should do, and saving up for the deposit and getting the house and chipping away at the mortgage, it was a pretty, I suppose, I wouldn't call it fast-paced life, but quite, I don't know, not happy, I suppose you could say. Okay. So for me, wealth sitting here now in a much better space in life is just being more settled and healthier. So I've lost 30 odd kilos in the last few years. A lot fitter, and met my partner, which makes a big difference. And she's got 3 kids, of which 2 are still at home, so that makes a difference. Having spent 20 years kind of on my own and living life as an adult and getting out there and working basically. So for me, I suppose wealth, I would say, it's definitely nice to have the homes, absolutely, and financially be in a place that you're kind of setting yourselves up in a classic Kiwi, I suppose, way of having your homes and paying off your mortgage and doing all that, but being a lot more settled and life's a lot more, I suppose.
Nice. I liked the use of the word settled. I think that's quite good. It's like contentment. Yeah.
It's funny you asked the question. I was just driving, I trained, but I was just driving home from the train last night, and I was thinking about, I read some time ago, and it's a classic phrase which I won't have right, but how New Zealand, we typically don't push ourselves enough because we're happy to get the batch, the beamer, and that's enough. And, we don't necessarily push our wealth and try to grow wealth beyond that. And I was sort of thinking, well, I'm probably one of them. I don't necessarily want to more than that as such from a money wealth perspective.
Yeah.
And so there's plenty of us out there.
Yeah, totally.
And probably ties into the settled a bit.
Yeah, I guess settled it could end up being comfortable.
Yes.
And is comfortable ideal.
Yes.
Right? We were talking a lot about inheritance on a previous episode, and how comfort in a way is like, if I was to maybe give my kids too much comfort, I'd maybe steal the ability for them to go out and get something and struggle. Because actually, I think settled was really cool, like way of putting it, because I think it is that. But at the same time, you must be, I believe, to get like extraordinary outcomes and really push yourself to get out of your own kind of current trajectory, you need to go through some pain and struggle.
Yeah.
So I think it's that balance of like, and we were talking about it when we were just before, where it's like, it's that balance of what we call beta and alpha. So what everyone else is getting, and you're kind of settled, kind of set and forget state. And then those activities that can create extraordinary outcomes. They're not guaranteed in life, but you're kind of putting yourself in a position where you've got a few things going on that could put you in a position where you have something happen that, isn't linear. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I guess.
Nothing today, is it?
No.
But I certainly agree around the if you like, the struggling in terms of, you kind of got to make your own way in a way. Both in terms of, if you like, the money wealth and just the rest of life. And there is something nice about being in your 40s that, I don't know, you seem to work through things more out. And I'm sure I'll sit here in my 60s and go, still didn't know much then.
Yes.
It does seem to make a bit of a difference. But yeah, it would have been interesting, I suppose, if, say, I'd grown up in a super wealthy family and whether because one of the things, I've got a pretty good work ethic, would that have been quite different? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you would never know.
Yeah.
Do you think your approach to wealth is something that you've picked up through the way that you've grown up, or it's morphed over time, or?
Probably both. Grew up farmer's daughter, and a child of farmers in the 80s and 90s wasn't the most, it was a pretty challenging time financially. So my parents were good with money.
Yeah.
And kind of had to be. And so I think there's a bit of that there. And Dad would always talk to us, well, not always, but he'd talk a bit about the old rule of kind of a third of your income on your house or rent, third on living, a third on tax. And actually Dad and I were chatting about it the other day, kind of going, is it still relevant now? Because I still kind of live with that and kind of have right through since earning money, and it's worked for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it would work today with house prices, for example, where they are. It would probably be near on impossible. So there's been a bit of that come through from my parents. And also, I'll never forget this, we had a couch for years and years and years. And I'm the youngest of three, probably 16, and Mum got a new couch. And I was like, wow, and it was a really nice, actually no, it was my 21st, and it was a really nice couch, quite expensive, and I said, why didn't you just buy some couches, as we grew up from farmers or something? And she's like, no, I'd rather wait.
Yeah.
And so she looked after what she had.
Yeah.
And then, they had money to go and get this. So I've got a bit of that from what I've grown up with. In terms of, I think my own way is probably more if you like, what we've been talking about, the non-wealth health or the non-money wealth of just sort of learning how to live my life my way and get to that, being in a much happier space and settled. And I'm sure my parents probably taught me this, but I probably just didn't listen around eating well and exercising and being out in nature and all that kind of stuff is super important to me now, and having that balance and things like that. But I think I had to learn.
Yeah. Sometimes learning things the hard way too makes you learn it a lot better, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so what was kind of the first thing then in terms of growing your wealth, whether it was financial or, from a more holistic point of view, that you were like, okay, I'm going to be much more conscious about the choices I'm going to make? What was that for you?
Probably on the money side, I don't know. I don't remember making a conscious choice. I think it probably wasn't ingrained in me, but I think I just sort of thought I'd get a house, save your money, be good with your money, get a house and chip away at that. And, I've always had, even pre-KiwiSaver, I was at BNZ and they had a super scheme, so I've always had something like that. And I think that was, just what you did. In terms of the catalyst for change with me was sort of early 40s. I suppose you could say I was probably running a lot, like not physically. And it just got to a point where clearly, I was probably running to find answers. So for example, I got an opportunity for a job in Queenstown and I was like, right, we'll go to Queenstown. I don't even actually particularly like Queenstown, so I was like, why on earth did I do that?
Yeah.
And living in amongst mountains and all that, great place to visit, but it just wasn't for me to live. And so there's various things like that, I built a house thinking, oh yeah, that's cool, but none of it was answering the problem, if you like, of finding that happiness. And I think I was probably on a decline for some time in terms of to rock bottom, but I never had a rock bottom moment of, I didn't like crash a car or something like that. I just, and then it was kind of towards the end of that role in Queenstown, I kind of realised, well, actually, you're not happy here. It's not, life's not working. And I was very unhealthy, drinking a lot, that kind of scenario. Not particularly fit, and I enjoy the outdoors and stuff like that. So I suppose that if there was a rock bottom moment, or I kind of think of it as a full stop, is I was on a road trip with a good friend of mine. We were heading up to Christchurch from Queenstown, and we're staying at whatever that hotel is at night, well, nice-ish one in Mount Cook. And I remember just waking up and just sort of sitting there and kind of doing this, just shout, just like a blah, and that was it, and then falling asleep and waking up in the morning saying to my friend, I was like, did I yell? And she's like, yeah, you did. And I was like, oh. And she said, I thought it was weird, and she just went back to sleep as well. And so from that, I sort of thought, okay, enough's enough. You've got to look after your health and all that. And by then I would have been either 40 or 41, and, there was only one way I was going if I didn't sort of sort it out. So I went in, resigned from that role. COVID hit, which it was a tourist role, so that was in some respects good for me. I was one of those COVID people that COVID was probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So the resignation came forward and lost a lot of weight and just got fit, came back north, which is, this is where I'm at, and then got myself out there on the old dating apps, met my now wife, and I've just kept the health, kept the weight off, and know that with work I'm just much better at being balanced with it and keeping the exercise, and I don't know what the secret is as to how I've changed and kept that change. And perhaps this is really who I am meant to be, as opposed to that life I had before in terms of, I just, Rose and I joke about starting a social media that's suburbia as ace, because literally that's what we do. We live in suburbia, I catch the train to work on the train, go home, meet in the beach for dinner, that sort of thing, garden in the weekend, and we're renovating at the moment and painting, and so and just love it. And then got the kids every second weekend doing stuff with them, and so it's a settled, simple life. So if you're wanting someone outrageously amazing, that's ambitious and all that. I'm the other.
Well, I think that it's a really important thing that there's no specific answer.
Yes.
And we all start from different starting points.
Yeah.
And obviously, we may have a few starts.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the whole point of the pod was to kind of find different starting points and different stories, because they all have learnings for other people to garner from. Yeah. So I don't think there's a boring or boring life.
Yeah.
I think it's just everyone has to find out where they find peace.
Yes.
And if it's doing gardening at the weekend and kind of doing things that seem kind of super suburban.
Yes.
If you're happy.
Yeah.
But, that's the key. Yeah. Whereas if you're doing a super suburban life and you're tormenting yourself in your head, then that life's probably not ideal, right? Yeah, so it's kind of, the whole point was just people's personal stories and how they're navigating wealth, because wealth is what everyone thinks they want.
Yes.
But really what they actually want is peace.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just that we are in a society and world that treats wealth like a score system. And actually I do think it is net probably a pretty good scoring system. People that provide a lot of value to the market typically get paid. So that is one aspect of it. But we all start from different starting points, and we all have different, I guess, objectives we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, and actually just going back, because part of the thing that I did when I sort of quit the job and drove back from Queenstown, it must have been when we'd come out of the first lockdown, I could drive back. And I remember pulling into my garage, because I keep my house up here, and it happened to be the 1st of June, and I said to myself, I'm not allowed to make decisions for a month. Nice. And it was the hardest month. Because I'd kind of been running. I've been talking about that running from decisions, and that was weird, because when I had to live with my feelings, which I don't think I've ever done, and a friend of mine visited me during that time, she said, it's almost like you become a bit Buddhist or something, because it was quite challenging for me. I'd never done anything like that. Just sit there and not make any decisions and just be. And it was quite full on. But it's been quite a good lesson for me, because one of the things I reflected on over that time was I'd accept doing a lot of things. So even recently, for example, a friend reached out asking if I'd want to put my name forward for a board. Old me would have been like, yep. But I now know that I put my name forward, I go in for things with great gusto, and then cram life, and then something's got to give, and then I feel bad because I'm not doing a good job, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm just saying no to things like that now, and just keeping it quite simple. And time will come for something like that in due course, if I want to do it.
It's learning your boundaries, right?
Yeah.
I find I'm in my 40s too, and my boundaries are a lot firmer now.
Yeah.
I've got less capacity to be able to just be that yes person.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you had to give any advice to someone who was kind of starting out on their wealth journey, what might that be?
It's quite a hard one, isn't it? Because it's just, even though I started, I suppose, in my early 20s, I don't know. Or do you start before? I think having a good work ethic, even though I've probably overcooked it at times, is huge.
Yeah.
And so I was reading something the other day. I think it might have only been on Instagram, but I still thought it was quite a good thing of apparently there's studies done that children that grow up in households where, you have your chores and you have to do X, Y, Z on Tuesday or whatever, and it's your responsibility every week to vacuum the lounge or whatever, grow up to be, more productive adults and happier in life and things like that. And so I think there is a bit to that around having the work ethic, about learning to take pride. And so Harry's 13, stepson, and he's just started to get his pocket money, and you can see him starting to learn, like this is learning, he vacuums and cleans the windows of all things. But he takes pride in it, and so it's quite cool. Yep. And so, he's quite happy if you go, you just need to vacuum this way. And so I think you can sort of see that's a really good sort of thing to have, is one, the work ethic, but the ability to have that pride of wanting to do it more. And so I think all that sort of stuff rolls into it, and ultimately, it has been good with your money, which sounds horribly boring, but, having your money there and doing your best to save it, whether it's the third, or whatever it is now, 25%, whatever it is trying to get on that, and I'm still, the property ladder as soon as you can.
Yep.
And I know it's even harder than when we did it, but yeah, and just, work hard.
How much do you think your training as an accountant has influenced your ability to look after your money, if at all?
I don't know. It's a good question, because logically you think probably a lot, and probably it has subconsciously.
Yeah.
If anything, it's possibly more, I think, just the household I grew up in and around that, kind of being good with money. And, both my siblings are, hard workers and also sort of saved up their money and bought the houses and done all of that. The accounting side, it's probably just helped me understand it more, maybe. But even then, I remember meeting the mortgage broker and being quite amazed at some of the basic things he told me. It didn't even occur to me, or because you don't get taught some of that if you like real life, or I shouldn't say real life stuff, but personal life stuff when you're an accountant necessarily.
Yeah, I just kind of often think of like companies, governments, and households. It's all really the same thing. It's cash flow and a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And often, and some of the greatest investors have kind of either come from being lawyers or accountants.
Yeah.
And I guess it's that ability to, see truth.
Yes.
From what you've learned, those hard skills.
Yes.
And I think that people would benefit a lot from thinking about their household or singular kind of income and financial situation as the same thing as a company.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You have a pool of assets and maybe some liabilities, and then you have how much you can bring in.
Yeah.
And as Carl Icahn says, which I constantly repeat, positive cash flow is happiness.
Yes. Oh, it totally is. Yeah. Yeah.
In all senses.
Yes.
Yeah. Government, companies, individuals.
The old business, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it really is, and it makes a huge difference. And I think the other tip that I would have is start as early as you can in terms of that sort of
in terms of trying to get positive cash flow.
Yeah, and don't get it. You get old enough when you can get a credit card and things like that. It's like, don't take that temptation.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever had anything on hire purchase. I don't think. And I just didn't.
Yeah.
That you just, as I said with the couch, you just waited till you could afford what you wanted and put up with what you had and looked after it and that sort of thing. Yeah, but the earlier you can start and save. But yeah, a friend of mine's, a contact of mine, sort of asked me to help them. They're a bit younger. It's a hard circumstance where, they've got young kids as well, and I kind of actually don't know where to start to help them.
In terms of getting to their goals.
Yeah, and saving, because every dollar is spent on living.
Yeah.
Like, where do you find that?
There's only so much you can cut out of your budget, right? Unless you need to actually start creating more.
Yeah.
To be able to do stuff with it.
Yes.
Only so many times you can pare back your grocery list, right?
Yes.
Well, you do get to a certain point. As previous guests were talking about their baseline, about people finding their baseline and getting good with that, and then using that as a way to then kind of build in a path. I guess it's really interesting you talked about that you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And a lot of what people need is actually a plan that is feasibly realistic to achieve some capacity, right?
Yeah.
Like I can get some positive cash flow, and then some of that can go into accumulating assets, and then eventually that will compound into something that will give me stability later in life. And I guess you're kind of coming at it from how would this person find enough to save a deposit to then get on the property ladder?
Yeah.
Because obviously over the last, especially 20 years, but beyond that, people that have become wealthy have been people that accumulate assets. And in New Zealand, obviously, it's very focused on property. It's like almost the only asset,
Yes.
which is a little bit anti-fragile. No, it's fragile.
Yeah.
Not anti-fragile. It's not anti-fragile, but that's the approach of this kind of jurisdiction. But in other places, it's other assets. And now what we're seeing with younger people, it's sovereignty over assets, not give give it off to someone else and have and it'll be okay in the future, which is a valid strategy. It will be, but my point is that, like you say, as early as possible, how do you start to build that asset base?
Yeah.
And your income is an asset,
Yeah, absolutely.
Is your income actually worth really three times your annual salary?
Yeah.
As long as you can keep it.
Yes. Yeah.
Your income's an asset. If you had a side hustle, that can become an asset. And obviously then your different investments can become assets and opportunities to have at least some compounding and appreciation, and not be, I guess, open to deterioration of the value. For example, keeping your money in a bank account and having inflation and really an erosion of the value of fiat currency to affect you negatively. It will be really interesting now because so many people can't borrow to get the leverage to buy that asset that everyone's been buying. So it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves and how people approach building wealth, because it's still possible.
Yes.
Like the practical difference of owning like an equity portfolio versus a house is that with a house, you're actually the real benefit is you're able to basically borrow 5 to 1.
Yeah.
So you're actually leveraged. Like you're not allowed to do that on a stock portfolio.
No.
But the principles are similar. And there are upsides to both.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's cyclical, so...
Yeah. They're typically not too out of sync
No.
from a cyclical perspective either, but yeah. And Sharesies has been great for that in terms of...
getting people to start.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, and just that whole mindset. And the other one that's fantastic is Banker's great in terms of... Gus came came in yesterday from school going, we're on to Banker. You guys come across
the kids.
Yeah, and he's like, I have to pay rent
literacy.
for my desk. What's that about? And I said, welcome to life.
Yeah. Oh, that's
it's
a cool
quite
thing.
a neat little, and he's not as money orientated as the older one, but hopefully this might kind of trigger him a little bit to kind of understand a bit about the excess money into the savings account and all that.
That's
sort of
cool.
Stuff. Yeah.
I think the next challenge is like for investors, and from what we're learning is people are very much more focused on that sovereignty piece, on like I own my assets, but I think the next stage for investors to go beyond that entry level of being aware that they can allocate assets to individual companies or things is how do you construct a portfolio, and that's I think the next evolution for the DIY investor, which you've seen in the US be highly successful. Australia, they are the second most popular market for self-directed investors. And then you've got Singapore and stuff. And that culture around, finding extra free cash flow and then allocating it to assets has just been so profound, actually, for the wealth and that wealth effect.
Yeah, and that ties back a bit to what sort of the opening comments I was talking about. We're getting our mortgage down to a point now where we do need to think more broadly around portfolio and things like that.
Yeah, because it's not such a burden on your cash flow.
Yeah.
Because your payments aren't overly exposed.
Yes.
Because obviously with this shift in interest rates, it's taken a lot of people off guard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a funny one. Again, it's I suppose when you're in your 40s. When I started, was I early 30s? I think when I got my house. The interest rates were all sitting around the 7-8%. So it's kind of like, well, it was a luxury in some respects to be down at 2 kind of 3%.
Well, it was unrealistic.
Yeah, totally.
But it created an environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That required then a shift.
Yes.
And then has obviously had consequences on that. And now a lot of that was obviously connected to COVID. Really. Yeah. Exacerbated an issue that was probably already kind of trailing its way up there. And it's all relative. It means that really value is all really relative to actually what money is worth or what money costs. But we've been in an environment now for so long where we've had cheap money. It's going to be really interesting to see what the next 5 years looks like around like how does it calibrate back to some sense of like a norm. Like even if, so I think the 10-year average on inflation now is like 3.5%.
Right.
And obviously the target is 2. And I think for us to get back to that average, we would over like I can't remember if it's a 20 or 30 year period, like inflation would need to be like 1%.
Yeah.
To get back to that kind of 2% average. So it's definitely kind of, I think, quite good if you're curious to find out about what the value of money means, because that can just give you a bit of an insight into the value of money and the cost of money changes over time.
Yeah.
And that can kind of equip you to just at least not be shell-shocked. Because, you know, I remember my mum has had several mortgages through her life, but I remember sitting her down and explaining how how interest rates worked and what interest really meant. And I'm like, how have you had like 3 houses, but you don't know the basics of like interest and how interest rates change and like the impacts on that?
Yes.
So I think it's something that maybe Banker and other apps, and I guess a mindset around kind of equipping people with like, I guess the more first principles knowledge rather than and it's work, but analogies of, do this path and you'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because then when it changes, you're like, was it really, will
Yeah,
it be right?
Yeah. I wish I'd borrowed heaps of money when it was at sort of 2-3 and started a portfolio and stuff, a share portfolio, but I've been an accountant to go back to that. Probably what I am is too conservative. That's probably where I've been a bit hampered, if you like, by being the accountant as opposed to helped. Yeah.
Well, you just need to work out how to push those boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is right for you
as
well, right? It's a personal thing. And certain people, like Charlie Munger had a quote where it's like, if you've not had a 50% drawdown in your life, you've probably not taken enough risk.
Yeah, right.
Which is a bit of a out there statement, but I kind of like it. Just, I like the premise of it. I don't like the concept of, because he's also very prudent actually. He was very prudent himself, and a lot of investors would consider him quite conservative. Yet he had statements like, well, if you don't have a 50% drawdown, you probably didn't take enough risk. That's kind of an interesting kind of dichotomy.
Yeah.
We've noticed from some of the previous podcasts, what comes up a lot in conversation is people's networks, and how that's helped them grow their wealth. Have you had a similar experience?
My wealth, probably, I suppose one of the things that you've mentioned is income's an asset, right? And that's probably one of my biggest assets, really, is income. And so from a network perspective, when it comes to my income, absolutely.
Yep.
So Ab, who we connected through, I met him through my previous contract, and, so the networks kind of go back. And how did I get that? Well, it was actually through a friend I went through school, and all that sort of stuff. The current contract I've got now is through networks I've had for over 10 years. And pretty much I haven't applied for a role with a CV and done formal interviews since my very first role at PwC. Yeah.
So networking's obviously been really...
So networking's, and it's interesting because it's one of the things that I've regretted more recently in life is I haven't really maintained them. More so recently, but sort of if you say mid-30s. And I haven't been working in the CBD until sort of recently, and it's been quite interesting catching the train into Britomart, how many networks I've reconnected either on the train or coming out of the train just in Britomart. Yeah, and just being in the CBD again has been huge.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at LinkedIn. So for me, it's kind of that in-person network and even, catching up with Ab. I haven't seen him for this year. So just things like that. So networks from an income perspective have been huge in terms of building other wealth, leverage them. It's not to say there's time. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so, you're married now and you've got stepchildren. How would you go about, I suppose, I don't know if educating is the right word, but kind of bringing them along on your wealth journey? The
older Harry, in terms of the two at home, Harry's easy because he's into it. And Rose was saying since a baby, he would always get the different coins and size them, and he'd know this different size and all pile them up and stuff. He's always been, so loves saving. So any money he gets, he puts into a savings account, and we talk about shares and stuff like that. Probably not meant to disclose. We do sharesies with him, and he's he's over 18, let's pretend. So he loves all that, and he was, looks at YouTube clips, and his name's escaped me. Who's the old guy that's made all the richest guy? Old guy.
The old dude?
Yeah. Buffett.
Buffett,
Yeah, he's
right.
like, who's this guy? So that's what he's,
Cool.
Yeah, so that's easy with him, and he's happy to do his chores and get some money, and then he'll come and say, can I get some more, and if you do this. So he's great, and he'll talk to me a lot about my job and just, understanding, when I go off at 7 in the morning, come home at 7 at night, that I've been working the whole time and all that kind of stuff. So he's interested in that. Gus is the one that's just got banker, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes, because he hasn't shown any interest whatsoever, and he's clever. Yeah. So we'll see. But so if we take him as an example, how would I get him interested? I think it's just the basics of going back to the chores, dare I say it, and the pocket money, and get him into that rhythm. So we will, when he's 13, kind of get him into doing that. And yeah, it's a good question actually. I will spend some time with him on Banker, because it's such a good tool. I don't know it well, but had a bit of a look, and I thought, actually. So the more we can get him into that, I think the better for him to understand stuff. Yeah. And not, I suppose in some respects, going back a bit to what you were saying before, a bit of pain, or, not spoiling them essentially. So not, what is it, sort of not giving them too much, but equally not letting them drown, I suppose.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on intergenerational wealth then?
I've certainly benefited from that to a point. So he passed away when I was early 30s, I think it was. And my cousins, siblings and I all got, I think it was I can't remember exactly, not a huge sum. Like it was into the tens of thousands, certainly not north of 50, but it was just enough for us all to just give that little nudge to the house deposit for all of us. My older cousins, I think they renovated their kitchens or something like that, but it was not enough to make you go, oh sweet, I can do nothing.
Quit my job.
Yeah, but just enough to make a little bit of difference to the house deposits, all that sort of stuff. And the part of me thinks, okay, I want to make sure I'm leaving whatever inflation adjusted that is to my niece and nephew, because it was just such a good amount to give you that. Then that just the nudge. Yeah. And I suppose we've always had the luxury with mum and dad. In the back of my mind, I've always known if, say, my income asset was to disappear overnight, because as a contractor it can, that worst case scenario, I know there's a backstop there if I needed it. And so for me, that's what I'd like to provide, is that backstop, that kind of thing, but not too much. So the intergenerational wealth, I think, has its place to a point as I suppose what's that saying? Not a handout, but a hand up. Yeah. If you're uber wealthy, I don't know how you manage that, because what else do you do with it though? Yeah. I don't know. And whereas, I suppose if you're uber wealthy and say you've got a business, then often you'll want to see that legacy carry on, right? And so making sure that's reinvested and all that sort of stuff in the business. Yeah. But it's an interesting one. I haven't really thought about it.
The consensus with the people that we've interviewed has been pretty much hand up, not hand out.
Yeah. I suppose I'm always of you got to work hard and create your own. And, but there's a backstop there.
If you need it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's like unsaid? It's just an unsaid thing. They just know. They should just know, rather than it be like an expectation that you kind of make it clear. I just think about myself. If I was to would I say that? Would I tell my kids that? Would I tell my son and my daughters, oh, by the way, there's a backstop, or is it just implied? There's more of a just me pondering based on what you just said. You know what I mean?
I think if we were being relied on, say, too much, let's fast forward and all three are out of home and they're dependent on us too much. They'd certainly, I think, would say something. Right. Especially if they're not putting themselves out there. Let's say if they're out there, say, getting themselves re-educated to help position them better or something like that, great, awesome. But if they're, watching NBA on the television all day and eating popcorn, well, that's a different story. Yeah. But and then does it come? I think it's implied in a way, but how do you make it implied? And I think it comes back to, and I'm a bit guilty of this. They kind of got to earn some of those little things they want. That's extra. So if they see the pair of Air Jordans that they love, how do you encourage them to save up for that rather than just go and buy them for them? And I'm a bit guilty, because then sometimes I'll just see something that's cool and just buy it. And then I'm like, yeah.
But that's the fruits of your labour. as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's also the newness of, I'm sort of 3 years into step period and, so there's a bit of it. I probably get as much joy out of it, if not more than them.
Yeah.
We certainly were never said like that. Mum and Dad never sat down and said those things to us. So we just, I suppose,
just kind of
learned or knew, because we'd always, all of us have had like summer holiday jobs and all that kind of stuff. And one of my biggest regrets, it sounds stupid, but is I used to play a lot of cricket, and I had a hand-me-down cricket bat, and I always wanted a new one, but couldn't afford it. And I don't know why, because I did save money, so I don't know why I didn't use my own money to go. Anyway, I didn't. And now that I've got my own money, I'm thinking, maybe I should go and get that. Yeah, even though I don't play and have no desire to play with it. But
put it on the...
Yeah, put it in the thing and go, with the old one beside it. I've still got that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So, I think it's things like that. So I knew that, my parents wouldn't get me a new cricket bat, just... beyond the budget, so to speak, but it's not to say they weren't paying me pocket money, and I was reasonably good with my pocket money, so I don't know why I didn't.
It's obviously not. You obviously had an attachment to that bat. It was obviously not a big enough issue.
Yeah. So I think encouraging kids that if they want something a bit extra than what's the norm, if you like, of what you're willing to provide, so to speak, and encouraging them to save and work out how to get it.
I think jobs early probably make quite a big difference to a work ethic.
Huge.
Like, I had jobs from such a young age, and I always worked doing something really crappy.
Yeah.
Crappy jobs are really great.
Yes.
Car wash.
Yeah.
KP, kitchen person.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I was thinking, I don't know what that
What's
is.
KP, so kitchen person plus waiter. I did that for
right.
ages. And I did it so I was doing all the washing up, all the peeling, and the waiting once. It's outrageous. And I think I was getting paid £4 an hour. What a joke.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think it's huge, isn't it, the work ethic? Like, I painted houses for 15 as a holiday job, so I did it for 4 or 5 summers. I loved it. And on reflection, like, I still paint now, so we renovated and I'm doing the painting, which I loved it when we started, I'm a bit over it now. So it's been a great skill, but I think with that, like, I had to be there at 7:45 every day.
Yeah.
And got back at 5:15 every day, and we had to clean up at the end of the day and the brushes and and it was very structured, right? You had smoko and lunch and smoko, and I think that's just given me not just the work ethic, but the structure, and particularly leaving at the end of the day tidy.
Yeah.
Things like that, which I went through a phase where I wasn't. Some people might watch this that used to work with me, and my desk would be the messes that probably you were seeing, whereas now I'm not like that. But work ethic, I think, is...
Yeah, totally.
Huge.
How do you cure it? Yeah, that's probably the best thing you can give your kids if you can. But you
Yes.
can't really guarantee that you can.
No.
Because it's about them.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, as much as we want to control or inflict good outcomes upon our kids, like, they're their own people.
Yeah, and that's where role modelling comes in, right? That's all you can do, really, isn't it? And as you say, they're their own beings. And I think by nature, and my sister must be the same. She's a lawyer, and her husband said to her dad or mum or one of them one day that apparently she can just sit there and read all day, every day, and not get distracted, and he just can't understand it. And I'm a bit the same. I can do boring things all day because I need to get something done.
Yeah.
But not everyone's built that way. They'll get distracted or need to, break it up or something like that. But
Totally.
If you had one piece of advice to give to people generally about kind of wealth building, what might it be?
be happy.
Be happy?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Well, you could, and it will all be very personal, but it's got to be happy, like you're saying. Like for me, suburbia is 8. Some people it won't be.
Yeah.
And the financial wealth that we have suits us.
Yeah.
But for some people, it wouldn't be nearly enough in terms of their ambition and drive, and the cars they want to drive or the boat they want to sail, and that's fine. But be happy, whatever makes you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good way to end.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Well,
for your
thank
time.
you.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.